Voice of
Right? Don't you love that? All at once. It's a course of lawnmowers.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's background noise for somebody who's not talking, I might mute you. So just be aware, check if you're muted before you want to speak and unmute yourself. Is it set, Monica? Is it set so people can unmute themselves? Hi, we're live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
Happy Sunday of Memorial
All
Day
right,
week.
we are now live streaming to Facebook.
Today is my 45th wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
happy anniversary.
Yep, that's a lot of years.
Ladies, we are now live on Facebook.
Excuse
Good
me. We are.
Greetings.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our show, Straight Talk About Racism. My name is Monica Lindsay, and I am so pleased to be here this afternoon with some wonderful ladies who are going to talk to us straight talk about racism and the impact of racism in the military service. Before we get started with the show today, though, I would just like to remind you that the Arundel Patriot is a nonprofit organization, and we do need your donations. Please do donate, become a monthly donor, go to www.patreon.org and donate to help this media continue doing what it's doing in the community. So today we have a special Memorial Day salute. We have some ladies here who had something to say about the military. Today that we're working with is racism pervasive in the military? And this is a part one discussion. We're going to hear some stories about the experiences that these ladies have and some words that they have to say about the experience in the military and being spouses and family members of military personnel, those who have sacrificed their lives for this country. And we're going to hear a dynamic conversation today. So I am so pleased to hand this over to the hostess today, who's going to kind of moderate the conversation, Eve Hurwitz, who served a proud military career that she will share more with you about. And all these lovely ladies are going to share some fantastic stories. Eve, you're on.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much, Monica. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so we're gonna tell our stories real quick, and then we're gonna start our conversation. So to kick it off is going to be Dawn.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dawn Collins, and I am the proud mother of Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III. Richard was the young man that was murdered on the campus of the University of Maryland 3 years ago. At the present time, my family, we're still waiting for closure on so many things. Just to give you some background, Richard was third generation military. His grandfather served in the Korean War. His father served in Vietnam. So therefore, Richard said he wanted to be a military officer as well. Richard was slated to be an intel officer, but circumstances happened that Richard was murdered before he could serve his country. But 2 days before this happened, Richard was commissioned as a military officer by a brigadier general. And at the end of that, she called him lieutenant. Well, when Richard was murdered and we were preparing for his homegoing service, we find out that the military refused and still has not given him his military honors because of, as they say, a policy. We've asked for exception to policy over and over again, and still to this day, it has not been granted. That's my story in a nutshell, but it is so disheartening because we all viewed our son standing in front of that brigadier general, taking that oath. And my question would have been, if Richard had decided that he didn't want to honor that oath, would the Army have said, okay, that's the end of that? I doubt that seriously. So that gives you a microcosm as to what my family is dealing with at this present time. And as I've said time and time again, no family should feel the pain that we are feeling at the present time.
Thank you, Dawn. Argo.
First of all, I want to thank my sisters for coming on today and sharing their stories. And I want to thank all of the women who have served in the military, so I salute you. My name is Argo Duenas. I'm a native Annapolitan. I'm the owner of Back to Nature Health and Wellness Center, served the Annapolis area for over 30 years. I also produce and host a local TV talk show called Your Health is Your Wealth. I'm also a veteran, and that experience for me was quite challenging. This topic for me is really very, very emotional because it has me looking in the rear view mirror and realizing that nothing truly has really changed. Racism is a virus, and it's still present in the collective consciousness of our people today. My story is a story of overcoming and becoming. My story is a story of tremendous mental anguish, physical pain and suffering, and extreme adversity in the United States Army in 1978. My story of becoming is a story of taking that pain and navigating through the racist system to becoming an outspoken advocate for myself as well as my fellow comrades during a period of intense, blatant, overt racial discrimination and oppression in the late 1970s. I enlisted as a single mom on a mission to get a marketable skill to support my daughter and myself. I was enlisted in a non-traditional field of electronics and engineering with all men of different races, different backgrounds, different ethnic groups and culture. And I served my country in Germany for 3 years. The overwhelming fear, the stress, the anxiety, the sexism, and the sexual harassment truly is beyond imaginable. I can testify today that it was only by the grace of God and the indwelling power of God within me that delivered me from the lion's den. I would be remiss today if I didn't share how the universe worked on my behalf. My unit was a technical unit. It was growing and it did not have an orderly room. The battalion commander ordered the unit to have an orderly room. And because I'm the only woman, I had the skill sets to type. And that's how I was able to get another MOS, 71 Lima, and I was able to use that position as an opportunity to help other comrades navigate through the system with promotions, with leaves, and with educating them about their rights and their benefits. So I'm here today to testify that I believe in the power of God and the power of resilience and keeping the faith. I'm advocating today for all those who are in the military because we know that racism still persists and it's prevalent. And I did a TV show with a young man who is helping many veterans find out about their benefits and their rights, because still veterans are not being told, about their benefits and their rights. So thank you all today for inviting me. And this is my story and I stand on what I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Argo. Maria. Oh, you're still muted, but I can't unmute you. I'm sorry.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. I'm approaching this from being a civilian who worked for the military, although I was also a military spouse. I first started working in the military in 1968. Put in basically 30 years as a civilian working. Eventually, President Barack Obama appointed me as Assistant Secretary of the Army, and in the position of what is, simply the Chief Financial Officer of the Army. I was responsible for $240 billion. And I personally believe that the appointees that Obama brought in were all extremely well qualified. 30 years in the military, 30 years working for the federal government, having achieved 2 masters and a PhD, on and on. So here I start working as Assistant Secretary of the Army. It's equivalent to a 4-star general position, but still, color gets in the way. We are still looked at as, in my case, as a brown person. And I started noticing in this position of assistant secretary that four-star general would not invite me to his meetings. He kept inviting the three-star white male, and that worked for me. And so four-star to four-star, he should have invited me first. That was protocol. That's chain of command. That's using their rules. So I went to him and I said, listen, General, general to general, four-star to four-star equivalent, you need to invite me before you invite the three-star white male. Well, he was so upset. He was so upset because he got caught. He got caught that he wasn't inviting the brown person to the meeting. He got caught not inviting the Latina to the meeting, and he resented it. And the next time we had one of those big dinners, I was supposed to sit next to him. He actually got caught moving my name to a different place because he didn't want to sit next to me. So here I am, appointed by the president, working in a four-star capacity, responsible for $240 billion and 1 million soldiers and their families. And I still have a general who does not want to give me the respect of my position. And so this story just goes on and on and on. And so I just want to really point out the fact, as it was mentioned before, that this isn't about an individual being overlooked. This is about a corrupt system. In this case, there is data. The Military Times did a study. 1/3 of our active duty see racism. And so we have to stop this. And thank you so much for having this forum and making us more aware of what's still going on.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Carmen.
Me? Hi, I'm Carmen Skarlupka, Navy veteran. I was enlisted from 1982 to 1988, went on and did reserve, worked for the Navy over at Office of Naval Intel for a while, also at the Naval Academy. So here I am. I was really fortunate to have a whole lot of positions where not only was I the woman in a command or in a space, if you will, but I was responsible for handling most personnel issues. So what that means is we're talking legal, we're talking orders, we're talking promotions, we're talking evaluations, and the level of discrimination that I saw in the very multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-international US Navy was astounding. So we had Filipinos who were not entitled to the same benefits. Now, these were Filipino nationals through our treaties. We also have Native Americans who even today are still trying to get their benefits. We are looking at Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rican population in the Navy. These were all clerical and food service and laundry steward, lower level positions. And what's interesting is that all started with the first African American that came into the military. That they were limited to these service positions and also could not promote to past a certain level and also not entitled to the same benefits. After World War II, we were looking at after World War II, the number of Black people who served were not allowed to use their GI benefits. They were not allowed to get housing. That's when the red line districting came into place, by the way. Go back and look at that. So we still have that today. I saw people of color getting charged disproportionately for non-crimes, if you will, we call non-judicial punishment, being late, not having a clean uniform, fraternizing with somebody. And what we do as a military group was, no two people, there's no rule. So today I could say, you know what, Argo, you're gonna lose a rank and lose pay for the next 3 months. And oh, Eve, you were with her and you two did the exact same thing. But Eve, you're just going to be confined to quarters for, I don't know, the weekend. Okay, thanks, girls. I saw it time and time again. I talked to people about advocating and how to appeal this, because people lost their jobs over this. They lost money, income. It affected their families. These weren't always single people. So to this day, there are specific groups at the Veterans Administration. There are funds set up to talk about, to adjudicate some of these wrongs that happened throughout the course of military. I can only assume it's still happening today. I look at the non-judicial punishments and the court martials that roll out through the Navy Times, Air Force Times, Army Times, Coast Guard, Marine, and it still looks the same. We are looking at people of color. I'm making some huge assumptions here because not all races are disclosed. But the way that punishments are handled out, and people being out-processed out of the military because of actions. So we have a huge issue that we need to really, really work toward. And happy Memorial Day to everyone.
Thank you, Carmen. Vicki.
Hi, I'm Vicki Gibson, and professionally, I'm a judge of the Orphans Court for Anne Arundel County, which is an elected position. I'm here in my individual capacity as a citizen of Anne Arundel County. I want to say thank you for your sacrifice, which is something that Dawn Collins taught us. And I think that that's something that's very powerful. I am the daughter of someone who served in the military. My father was an oral surgeon in the military, and he was stationed in France. So after I turned 6 weeks of age, we lived for 4 years in several locations in France. And that was it. I guess I bring a different perspective. I didn't have an opportunity to talk to him about what the negatives were. He never spoke really even of the positives. The only thing that I know was leaving the country during the civil rights movement was like a breath of fresh air for them. And I know that my mother came back and she was able to speak and write fluent French and went on to have a career in that area for some time. But when I came back, I noticed that I felt as a child that I was able to move and navigate in ways that I kind of picked up that other kids weren't able to. And it created a little bit of a disconnect for me because I began to see the racism in the broader community. And I know professionally, I've experienced a lot of what has been described. For example, the example that Mary gave, I experienced at the State Department. And so, you know, there is significant discrimination, significant systemic discrimination throughout government. I know one quick story was I was working with employee associations across the world providing legal advice. And I remember we used to have to give them legal advice on how to proceed. And one of the questions that came in was from the Mexico embassy. And they basically asked, what do we have to let Foreign Service nationals use our exercise equipment? And I said, of course, you need to let them use it. You know, they're a member of your, employment group. Yes, you need to let them use the equipment. And then I got a response back and they said, well, who's going to clean up after them? That's racist. But if you say that to them, they don't seem to get it. And I don't know why, but it is racist. And that's the kind of systemic racism that is so embedded in our society. It's the kind of thing that needs to stop. So again, thank you to everyone for your service, and to everyone else, happy Memorial Day.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. Sheila.
Hello, everybody. Sheila Bryant, and I really concur with everything everyone's been saying so far. I'd like to say a shout out to all those people who've experienced a military person who has passed away in honor of Memorial Day today. I don't know if it's a fun fact. The first commemoration of Memorial Day was by former slaves who were commemorating the death of 10,000
Union troops who died in North Carolina in Charleston in a prison camp. They died from injury or disease, and the slaves came and brought flowers and food and stuff to commemorate that their death, because they were buried in mass graves. Anyway, so I'm a retired colonel from the Marine Corps. I spent 10 years on active duty, and then another 20 years in the very active reserves. I spent at least 100 days per year. So I've been everywhere from Cuba to Japan. And my daughter is active duty Navy. My son is in the Army ROTC, and my son-in-law is active duty in the Air Force. I am currently a candidate for Congress in Maryland's 4th District, which includes parts of Anne Arundel County. And some of the issues that I'm fighting for are racial and social justice, criminal justice reform. I believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Affordable, sustainable housing, the Green New Deal, which includes good jobs to replace those jobs that are going to be displaced by transition to renewable energy. And so one thing before I get into my story is that I really want to say we got to vote, because they've already sent out most of the ballots and only 10% have responded yet to this date. So if you're sitting out there and you haven't sent in your ballot, it's all by mail. We do have opportunities to vote in person, but for the most part, it's going to be by mail. So please just fill it out. You could select my name, it's okay. But anyway, so I think one of the most embarrassing times for me as a Marine was in 1993 when the commandant, his name was General Mundy, he went on 60 Minutes and he was talking about why. The question was, why are there so few officers in the Marines? And he said, well, you know, they don't run, they can't swim, they can't do navigation. I was like astounded. It's like, all of the people that I know were good. This is like what you do in officer candidate school. You have to do those things. And most of us were really good at it. But just the idea that he was put us all into that category, make that kind of racist, blatant statement like that. He later apologized, but still, today, less than 5% of the military officers, of the Marine Corps officers are Black. And that's compared to 15% of the enlisted are Black, but only less than 5% of the officers. And that right now, there's only one ever in the history of the Marine Corps, one African-American female general, ever. And that just happened last year. You know, when I got promoted to colonel, there were only 7 others who had been promoted to colonel. That was in 2004. And it hasn't gotten that much better. So how, you know, the experience, the discrimination that I experienced was mostly in, you know, performance evaluations where, you know, you're rated at the bottom unless you do something extraordinary, as opposed to your white colleagues who came in at the top and they really had to screw up in order to get rated in a negative way. I mean, as a lawyer, I did see that charges are brought disproportionately against people of color across the board. And they spent more time in more drastic penalties for whatever action that they took. And again, like Carmen was saying, the systemic and intentional racism, that's, you know, it's not just in the military, it's pervasive all over our society, with all of the things like not allowing African Americans to pursue the loans through the GI Bill and other kinds of things. It's clearly an intentional, it's affected us in ways where we started to sometimes accept not the fact, but the notion that we're less than or not capable of success. It's created an environment where we're represented more in prison than we are in college. It's indicative of the fact that there's a huge wealth gap, that we can't close that because we don't get the education, we don't get the opportunities. And ladies, we got to fix that. We need to get involved. We need to vote. We need to elect our leaders who are going to change the structure. We can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different response. And so I've been a vocal advocate for those things, especially criminal justice reform and legalizing marijuana, cannabis, to make that, to and exonerate exonerate the records of those people who've been impacted by the so-called war on drugs. It's not right, and we've got to fix that. So thank you all for the opportunity to be amongst this great group of ladies, and y'all have a great Sunday and great Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Claudia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is my third opportunity to be on Straight Talk About Racism, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this very distinguished panel of military personnel, former and present. I want to honor those that have made the ultimate sacrifice and died, be they military that were active in duty, and they passed away from years back, going all the way back to the Civil War. That was a bloody war, and many people sacrificed and lost their lives to allow this country to survive and to succeed. But we've had so many other tragic deaths that have happened, and just listening to the story of Lieutenant Collins, I weep every time I think about that tragedy. And I'm here, Claudia Barber, as a lawyer who is an advocate for social justice, and also someone who ran for office in 2016 and 2018. But most importantly, I'm here to facilitate the discussion on how do we change things and how to navigate through solutions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Claudia. Before we get to Allie, just a quick reminder to everybody watching, thank you. Please share the live stream on your Facebook pages and comment and tell us you're here. Thank you. Allie, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm going to, who said that earlier? I'm here in a civilian capacity. I love that. Whoever said that, I love that phrase. But yeah, I'm here as a civilian. I did attempt to do the military twice, but fate intervened. My grandmother and then a baby. But my grandfather was a World War II veteran. And then, of course, all my uncles were military, including my father. And then, of course, I would marry someone who was military. He was a Marine. And then I have a lot of friends, and of course, other family members, they're military as well. And so I've always had, even though I wasn't in the military, I've always been in a space to where I've been able, I don't want to say have both feet in both worlds, but maybe have my ears in both worlds to be able to see the difference between the civilian world versus that of the military, and of the privilege and how it exists in both worlds, and then of how those who may be in a privileged place in the military don't get access to those privileges. And so I'm gonna step back now because, like I said, I am a civilian, and I do recognize that my knowledge is limited, and it comes from second person and their stories and their exposure to what they experienced. And so I really look forward to hearing what you ladies have to say based off yours, because I'm gonna be honest, the majority of what I have always, when I've heard about the intersectionality between races, racism and femininity, and just being someone melanated in the military, it's always come from a male perspective. From them telling me their stories, what they experienced, what they saw, what were their reactions. And what I know about the female experience is limited because it's based off what I've read, and the videos that I've seen, or interviews that I've seen. And so I am just excited to be on here with you strong ladies. I'm just a tad bit envious because I just knew I was going into the Air Force. And so I cannot wait to hear y'all's experience, and I appreciate you allowing me to share this forum or this platform with you.
Thank you, Allie. We would have rather had you in the Navy, but okay. So before I tell my story, I just want to say thank you to the Arundel Patriot. Please like the Arundel Patriot page. Also share that out. They do great work. They're also a nonprofit. So if you could donate to keep the work going, that would be great. They have a Patreon page, and we'll try and put that link up for you. So I'm Eve Hurwitz. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a naval flight officer in the E-2C Hawkeye, which is like the AWACS, but for the Navy. I always say that we do it in a smaller plane with less people and less money, better. Sorry, Air Force. So, so I was on the USS Enterprise twice. I was on the second to last cruise, and I was in Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I had 8 years active duty, and I'm still in the reserves as a lieutenant commander. One of the things as an aviator, you have your aviation job, and then you have what they call ground jobs. Ground jobs are, you know, what you do when you're not flying, and you usually have a variety of them. One of the jobs that meant the most to me was called Command Managed Equal Opportunity Officer. So I was a CMEO, which meant that anytime there seemed to be some kind of conflict, they would throw it to me. And it was about anything. It was basically like, there's conflict, go take care of it, because we're very conflict averse. Do your job, don't talk about your emotions. That's kind of the military. So as the woman, I was the CMEO. And as we've heard already, women get put in those positions that are typically feminine and nurturing. I didn't necessarily mind because I do love people and I wanted to help. But and we'll get into that later. Another thing I wanted to say, Sheila, I'm so glad you brought up cannabis, because as we all know, people of color are disproportionately negatively affected by the laws on cannabis. In the military, it is the same. I watched people of color pop positive, get kicked out. I watched white people pop positive and just stop doing that. Just don't do that. Just push it aside. Don't do it. We're not going to punish you. The white supremacy exists in the military, and then it rolls to the rest of us. We are all in the military industrial complex. And I feel that my role as a white person, as a woman, as a veteran, is to call out. I know we're not supposed to call out. I'm going to call out all day long. We need to call out the white supremacist culture, and we need to say what needs to change and what the problem is. And there are too many white people that are turning the other cheek, good people who are not saying anything. And then that calls into question, let's really be good by saying something and let's change it. I saw way too many people taking advantage of their privilege unnecessarily. I was in the ship store once, and then I'm gonna finish it up, but I was in the ship store, and in the ship store, this is just like a little convenience store that's in the carrier. In the ship store, if you're an officer, you can cut in line. It's just one of those privileges. Unnecessary in my opinion, unless you're about to fly, and then and I did that like once because it was combat, I had to fly, I needed food, whatever. Never used it otherwise. But over and over again, I would see white aviators come in who I knew were not about to fly. I knew there was no time sensitive. The line was full of people of color and they cut in front. And to me, that's not even a microaggression. That's just a straight up aggression. Why are you doing that? So the kind of taking advantage of the system over and over again to the detriment of people of color, I see that all the time in the military and outward. So that's one reason I'm here. So before we start getting into the discussion about how we dismantle racism in the military, I want to address a question that came up on Facebook, I believe. So this is from Charles E. James Sr., and it's a question for you, Don. For the appeal to the military to give your son his rightful honors and commission, what have they said, and what can we do as a community to help? And then after you answer the question, we'll start our discussion.
Okay, I'm petitioning the community at large. You let the people know that this is not right. My son took an oath to serve. And what have we done? We've gone all the way to the Secretary of Defense. That's what that means. And we're asking for an exception to policy, because we all know we're federal workers, state workers, local. Policy is not law. Anytime that we can change a policy. And my husband and I were informed that the policy had been changed over and over and over for cadets that had not even taken the oath. So we're dismayed. Why? Again, the Secretary of Defense. No, the policy stands. Again, that's a policy. That's not a law. That's not a regulation. It's a policy. And we know that policies can change. So therefore, we are asking those that are out there. We know that people can change things. Let them know that this is not right. Because again, as I said in the beginning, Richard didn't have a choice. None of this. He was not there. He was minding his business. And because he had taken that oath, He didn't have the choice to say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go home and take a nap. No, we all know, as Eve is saying, where would he have ended up if he decided that I didn't want to go, Eve? He'd been in a brig. So I'm asking the public at large, make an appeal. This is not right and it needs to change.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. And we'll
Claudia?
give a link. Sorry, go ahead, Claudia.
What email address could they use to petition?
I'm going to have to get that. I don't have that right now in front of me, but what I do, I will give that to Vicki, and that can be something on the Arundel Patriots website that people can see and get that information, because we're not going away. I refuse to go away. There's something that my son used to call me. He used to call me Mama Bear, and anybody knows what Mama Bear, they take care of their cubs until the very end.
I wonder what suggestions Mary and Sheila might have in terms of how to push that issue forward based on their experience within the military.
You know, sometimes it does take a legal remedy, you know, filing a claim against the government for that. I don't know, I know that you haven't proceeded to that yet, but if there is right now an appeal to the Secretary of Defense, we could start a letter writing campaign and make appeals. And sometimes, especially, I know my daughter worked for the Secretary of, not the Secretary of the Navy, but the Navy Chief Executive Officer, and she told me that he read each letter personally. If you make it personal and say, this is what happened to me, to the Army and to the military and to the Secretary of Defense, do a personal letter and do a congressional letter to explain that. And I think if you haven't done it, I'll help you with it.
Our congressional people do know about this, so as well as our 2 state senators, they are aware of this, but it's just the insult of it to do this, to take an oath, and then find when you're burying your loved one, refusing to be given military honors.
So Dawn, you said they're aware of it. Are they championing it? Are they, you know, actively?
The 2 state senators are aware.
Have you written a letter to the SecDef? Are they personally putting their thoughts on paper and demanding a remedy?
I will be happy to discuss all that with you ladies offline and explain in detail what we have done. But what Eve was speaking of before is just that when we talk about a policy, go forward and let the same thing happen to each individual. And when a family is dealing with the death of a loved one, again, we know of cadets who did not take the oath that were giving the exception to policy and did receive military honors for their burial.
You know, the reason that I asked whether or not they were actively championing your issue, these, you know, the congressmen and other elected officials, is because there was a meeting recently where I was told that they talked about accountability from your elected officials. And I think that that's important. So, I mean, if they're not doing what you think that they should be doing, then it's time for us to get new ones. And I'm an elected official, I can say that. So.
Yes, ma'am. As I said, I will be happy to speak with all of you and let you know exactly, because it's a long drawn out process. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but where we are, because I don't intend to let this particular issue die.
Thank
and you shouldn't, Dawn, let it die.
Exactly.
So
Okay, so we
Eve-
have another question from Emma Buckman, and this is kind of for everybody. So it's a good thing for us to be talking about anyway. Would you be able to touch on the disparity of access to benefits and healthcare between veterans of color and white veterans? This is definitely an issue, so go.
Well, I would say that the access is there because they do have representatives through the VFW and other organizations that can help guide you through that. It's not always easy, and I know of a guy who was eligible for a veteran's pension because his income was less than I think the poverty level, less than 1% of the poverty level. And he took 10 years for him to just take the action to do it. So a lot of it's, you know, our reluctance to act because we think that we can't have it or aren't entitled to it. And so there are resources out there where people can help you and guide you through it. They've gotten a lot better than they were 10 years ago, when they had lines and lines of veterans who had not been able to get medical attention and what have you. They've, you know, all of the pushback has gotten results, and it's a lot better. The VA system is really, it's good. And yes, there are some complications, and if you don't have a straightforward case, it may be difficult to get relief. But you have to be assertive, just like in every other aspect of our life. You just got to push it. You can't just say, "Oh, they told me no." When somebody closes the door, there's a window open. So go look out the window and see what's out there for you. But you can't just let it go. There are resources, and we can't accept the fact that we don't get the resources because we're Black. Not today. You use whatever resources whatever wits you have, and then get help, because there are people at the VAs you can call. Every veteran organization has designated representatives that can help you do the work, and they'll actually look at your medical records and help you file for a disability claim. So I'd say the only access would be if you're in a rural community where there are no VA facilities, then it may be difficult. But or if you just don't take the action. That's been my experience.
I'd like to add that racism affects the pension tremendously. I mean, if you don't get promoted, once you retire, you're going to get a lot less money. So whereas if you only made it up to major, you're going to get half the money that if you made colonel, or you're going to get half the money if you had made general. So racism affects us tremendously. So it makes it so much harder for us to live on a retirement. It makes it so much harder, even when you're active duty, if you're a lower rank, to support our families and to educate them and to give them what they need. And so it seems like everybody's treated the same in the military, but they're not, because structurally, if you don't make rank, you don't get the money. You don't get and that translates to benefits and economic well-being. On top of that, you have PTSD. And so with PTSD, you're less able to advocate for yourself. Racism affects people mentally. And I think it puts it at a hard, it's harder to advocate for yourself if you're mentally not, 100%.
I totally agree with that. And you can see the numbers of enlisted versus officers, that is absolutely true. When you retire, you only get based on your payment based on your rank.
Recently, I heard of a term called weathered in terms of the COVID situation and why so many African Americans are getting COVID. And it had to do with you're already in a negative position. And so over time, with the racism and the this and the that, and the health issues that come because of the racism, that you are in what they calling weathered. And I think I want to take, liberal privileges now and adopt that term for this situation, that the person of color in the military becomes weathered. So there's all these things that are happening at multiple points. And when you get to a point where you need veterans benefits, you're tired. You've been, like Mary was saying, to her point, I thought was an excellent point, that, you just become so emotionally drained that it's hard to then go pick up the banner and fight again for benefits that you're being told that you're denied just because somebody decided they feel like it that day to deny you, or because that's what the pattern is. You have to go be denied at least once or twice before they'll approve it. It's just something wrong with that. And that's not equity in the military at all, from my perspective.
Agreed. Argo has been wanting to say something. Go ahead, Argo. Oh, you're gonna have to unmute yourself though. Sorry about that. There you go.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Thank you so kindly. I'm in total agreement with Vicki and Mary racism affects the very core of your being, your mind, your body, and your spirit. And I can attest to that based on my experience in 1978. The racism was so pervasive that it actually created a health challenge for me. And I wound up having to have major surgery as a result of the stress, the fear, the anxiety, the post-traumatic stress. And even today, at this very moment, having to go back and relive that story actually affects me on some deeper level. So I want to say that, Sheila, yes, it's gotten a lot better in terms of access to VA benefits. When I got out in 1983, I didn't know, and I wasn't told that I had health benefits. So I thought health benefits were only for people who were retired. And I became a business owner, and I paid thousands of dollars to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and really couldn't afford it because I didn't have any health care. And then I eventually found out word of mouth, and believe it or not, there's still veterans out there today, veterans from the Vietnam War, who are not aware that they have health benefits and that their diseases of cancer and different health problems that they're having is due to the Agent Orange. So I was eventually able to get into the VA medical system in Baltimore and in Glen Burnie, and it's great. And so they do have a center in Annapolis. It's a veteran center that it's available to vets. They will walk you through the process of, getting claims and getting your benefits. But the racism is still very pervasive. And I'm here, and I consider myself blessed because I'm still alive and I'm still able to tell my story. As far as COVID, yes, African Americans, because we're under tremendous amount of stress, my business has been down since March the 13th. I'm actually in a survival mode, trying to find ways to get, funding to take care of myself and my business. So the stress can actually weaken your immune system. So it's very important that people really, really begin to take care of themselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, get help, get therapy, take nutrients, eat a healthy diet, get out and get sunshine, get vitamin D, because a lot of African Americans are very, very low in vitamin D. We know that that strengthens our immune system. This virus is no joke. It's taking out a lot of our people. And I truly believe there is another story behind the story of depopulation. And that's a whole nother issue. But I do believe that. And racism is just a tool. It's global to do that.
Thank you, Argo. Yes. So I want to pose a question to you guys. I think that the most important, I have two raised hands. Hold on, let me take care of those raised hands first. And then Claudia, go ahead. Welcome to pop in though.
Hello. I wanted to just chime in and definitely agree wholeheartedly that racism is a virus, but it's also toxic. And to the extent that it's toxic and it impacts and explains the wealth gap, just as Mary had suggested, in terms of if you don't get the promotion, that impacts your pension. So the question that I have for our wonderful, fine military panelists would be, how do we solve racism? What are the solutions? What can be done? Because not only, we already know we see it's in the military, but it's in the private sector, it's in the public sector, it's there. But solution-wise, just as Eve, you mentioned early on, how, for example, the non-judicial, and also Carmen mentioned the non-judicial punishment, and how often that's attached to something a minority would do, and then it's not attached. But see, we're talking about huge impact because it impacts people's career. It impacts their mobility up the chain. It impacts their ability to gain momentum and be a part of wealth. So, we can't dismiss this and basically say that people are just exaggerating, or it doesn't exist. Racism really does exist, but the impact is something to discuss and have meaningful solutions, because a lot of this has to do with the fact that, when you are marginalized in this way, you don't have the money to pay lawyers to go through a legal system that is sometimes often against you anyway, because the judges in the judiciary they think the same way the people that have discriminated against you think, and they don't see it. So how can we come up with viable solutions? Thank you.
Argo, and then Vicky, please. And then Carmen. Go ahead, Argo.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Vicky, and then Carmen.
So in my opinion, racism is complex. It's not, there is no simple, one size fits all solution. I do feel that you have to have multi-level systems within government. So at each level of government that analyzes, reviews, and then has some enforcement authority to look at things through an equity lens. And if they have the power to reverse decisions, so they're independent entities within government that have the power to reverse some of these decisions. That's one thing. Then I think that you also have to increase criminalization of racist acts that hurt people. That it's often minimized, like for example, in the case of Dawn's son, where people are just allowed to basically get away with murder, and that's not right, and it needs to change. And it really comes down to a vestige of slavery, that Black lives are not valued at the same degree that there are white lives. We can look at the situation with COVID. In Anne Arundel County, 26% of there's a 26% mortality rate for Black Americans in Anne Arundel County, but they only occupy 16% of the population. Now, if the reverse were the case, and there were only 16% of white folks in Anne Arundel County, yet they were dying at a rate of 26%, you don't think that there would be like a massive infusion of funds to get, to identify what the hell was going on so that they could stop it? They definitely would, So, I mean, to me, that people talk about Black Lives Matter. Well, the reason Black folks are saying Black Lives Matter is because it's obvious through policy, through practice, that Black lives don't matter, And it doesn't mean that white lives don't matter. It just means that we matter too, And that's something that's constantly marginalized. And that's what happens, and that's why folk get so frustrated, because of the vast marginalization in terms of everything, and it's just really, really, really frustrating.
Thank you. Carmen, go ahead, and then I have a question for everybody. Oh, you're muted. You got it.
Hi. So I just uploaded a couple of links. If you are non-white, and if you can claim being non-white or white passing, I added the special VA benefits, Veterans Affairs benefits, for people who are of Filipino heritage. I just also uploaded the benefits specific to people who are Native American. There are also specific benefits if you are Samoan, Guamanian, Puerto Rican. Okay, we have all these territories. So I'm going to upload all of those, because in the past, people, what happened is you were just told, sorry, you didn't qualify. Just like the Black people who were not allowed to get access to their GI Bill or their housing, their certificate of eligibility for a VA home loan. There are now, what do you call them? Retribution packages. They go back, reparations packages, if you will. They go back and say, you are eligible, and your descendants, your survivors, if this person has passed. So please, I implore everyone, get yourself a veteran service officer that have been mentioned, whether it's the Purple Heart, the VFW, or the American Legion, and apply for those benefits. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you so kindly.
So, oh, Dawn, you want to go? Go ahead. Hold on. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Thank you.
What I wanted to add to something you're saying, what we can do about this, something's very, very important to know who your local and state officials are and what is it that they stand for. Not the laws need to be changed. As in the case with my son, after the hate crime law was thrown out, needless to say, we were devastated. But we were able to go in and make a point with the legislature to change that hate crime law. That's something that needs to be done throughout the nation. The laws have to reflect the people and what the people's needs are. And you also, again, as Sheila said, the people need to vote. You need to know what those decisions are and how it affects the people, and therefore we need to do something about it. I just think that we need to have a more educated public, and it helps when women like us, Black, white, brown, straight, gay, discuss the issues and be passionate about it.
Thank you, Dawn. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
Okay, so one of the, as far as, we don't vote for generals, but we do vote for Congress, and Congress can hold generals accountable.
Correct.
I always go to the generals because they're the leaders. They're the ones that create the environment. They're the ones that create the culture, and they're the ones that have to start changing it. So what I think is, just like we have a senator that jumped on the issue of sexual harassment and made the military accountable and report and develop programs to make sure that we got rid of sexual harassment, although it still exists, unfortunately. We should do the same thing for racism. We should have the military have to account for how it's promoting people of color, have to account for all kinds of the complaints that they're getting, and have to account for the improvements that they're making, all the way to the top. It should be very, very visible how, the institution of the military is going to improve this, and they've got to be held accountable for it by the senators, by congressmen, and by the president. And visible to us, the people.
Can I jump in?
I want to just make a note. Go ahead, Allie.
Just real quick. Also, and I'm going to just piggyback off what you ladies said, and especially something that Vicky said about crime. Like, racism does need to be criminalized. In South Africa, they're already doing it. There have been incidences. I've been even watching some of the videos because I follow what happens in South Africa and other nations. But one of the things I know that there was an incident, I don't know if you guys saw the video, it may have been a year ago. I know it hasn't been over a year, or maybe a year and a half, where a lady was stopped. I mean, no, her car broke down. Did I already tell this story? Because I've told this story like 3 million times. All right, well, so it's like the lady, her car broke down and the police come. And we all know that because of the transition from apartheid, now police officers, they are African now. And so when these police officers got out to help her, she, of course, to keep a long story short, she gets upset because she thought that there were going to be white officers that came to assist her, and they weren't. And I don't know if you all know anything about South African culture, but in parts of Africa, there are words that were created that are equivalent to the N-word.
Wow.
So we have an N-word, they have their word also too. And so she started calling them by this racial slur, and she starts screaming. And one of the police officers actually takes out his phone, and they starts filming her. And in the end, they arrest her, because he was like, if you call me that again, he's like, I'm going to arrest you. She's arrested. She goes to court. In the end, she's sentenced and she goes to prison.
Wow.
And I was like, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm like, because in this country, I think it was you that said it, Vicky, is how literally when crimes are committed against people of color, whether it's on the outside or even on the inside in the military, it is not labeled as a crime against people of color. It's given another term. So therefore, they don't have to criminalize or penalize the person that, that commits that crime based on skin color. And I do think that it is our responsibility as civilians, because as civilians, we dropped the ball. Because you got to understand, the military and the government reflects the people.
Right.
And we are the people. And we have dropped the ball on accountability. And so for all these individuals that come out here and say voting doesn't matter, of course it doesn't matter, because first of all, you didn't do your diligent research. You didn't listen to what the people said, and then you didn't go out and vote. And so I think that we, like the first thing, like I had said during this last election, that anybody who comes up to me that is running for office, when they come to me, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, what is your platform? What is your status when it comes to racism? What is it that you have in regards to the African and the indigenous community for us when we deal with racism? What does that look like? Do you have a plan? Because if you can't come to me with that, then why am I voting for you? Why am I continuing to keep the establishment in place? Because when you vote for individuals, we've got to break the cycle of the lesser of two evils. And we've got to not be afraid as we the people to jump ship, and to vote for third-party candidates. There is something to that if you look at the English model of what happens when there are more than just two parties, because that is also, I think, a tool that no one has really looked at in regards to breaking the racist cycle that has been established in this government that is on paper. Because remember, this government is based on paper, it's based on ideology, and we, the people, we're just following through with that. And so I think until we start to push the own people, look, and I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna step back. First of all, the fact that we know that racism is so insidious to the fact of that we know, especially as people of color, that the person who I'm voting for doesn't look like me, but I'm still gonna look to them to save me, even though I have somebody who looks like me that's running for office. We've got a problem. I mean, that's how insidious racism is. And so until also too, as we as people of color and anyone else who's saying that they're going to support our agenda and they're our allies and they're our accomplices, until they start to support us and we start to support our own, again, what we see here in the civilian world and in the military is going to continue, because we haven't chosen also ourselves to break that cycle. And so I think that's something for us to think about.
Absolutely, Ali, thank you. Claudia, and then Vicki, and then we have a question from our viewers.
Well, I just want to briefly reiterate and chime in based on what Ali said, because she just hit the nail on the head when it comes to accountability. She, in my opinion, is going in the right direction in terms of solutions, because there's got to be a deterrent, a strong deterrent to racism. In other words, people need to know that, hey, when you use call people out of their name and use racially offensive terms, you lose your job behind that. The penalty needs to be even to the point that, again, that there's accountability. Because once the end result is that there's no accountability, then that trend is going to follow. And we saw that with the governor in Virginia when he was called out for the racist yearbook photos. And his denial that no, he wasn't in blackface, even though he was standing next to somebody that was wearing a Klan outfit. They need to be called out on that stuff. And because he stayed in office, then, the Maryland delegate felt that she should stay in office too, after she was caught using a racially offensive term. Then the governor in Alabama, when she was called out, she feels she should stay in office. We need to stop that and reverse that trend. We need to identify this as insidious, and it is extremely offensive to the population of voters who are putting you in office. And to that extent, there's got to be also greater accountability. There should not be a judicial system where judges are not held accountable for sentencing disparity. If you are sentencing Black folks to 20 years in prison and you're sentencing white folks to 2 years probation for the same offense, something's wrong there. And there has got to be a correction of that. There has got to be a system in place, and we need to have legislators in place that will address these issues head on and do something about it. Thank you.
So how do we go about doing that, Judge Barber?
I got an idea for that, but go ahead after Vicki. I'm going to put a question out there and we'll address that.
So I just wanted to, as we were talking, I had like an aha moment that there's also like a wink and a nod between systems, between the military system and the civilian system. So, and we can see that wink and nod, that kind of implied agreement that, you know, you kind of do your thing and we'll leave you alone in the Marguerite Morris, Kathleen Morris's death investigation, because now Kathleen, for those of you that don't know, Kathleen Morris was found dead, or Catherine Morris, I'm sorry, was found dead at the Arundel Mills parking lot in 2012. Well, her husband was in the military and he was getting he was getting benefits for housing, but he wasn't giving them to his spouse. Apparently, this is a common fraud that occurs. And she, within like 48 hours of her telling him that she was going to tell the officials about this fraud, she was found dead in this parking lot. And it's never been, to the families, from the family's perspective, properly investigated. And even though the military found fraud in terms of the insurance case, they went on and gave him the survivor benefit of $100,000 and some without fully investigating the possibility that she might have been killed. And because they didn't investigate it, there was less focus on the local authorities. The local authorities felt, well, if they're not going to investigate it, must not be anything else there, so we're not going to really investigate it. So it's that wink and a nod thing that has to stop. You know, there has to be accountability. Everybody, if that was a white woman, I believe strongly they would have handled her death investigation differently. And again, it comes down to the powers that be do not value the lives of people of color, and that has got to stop.
100%. Absolutely. Thank you. So that kind of segues into what I want us to talk about. And I just want to address, originally, I know we were scheduled for an hour, but we've had requests to go to at least an hour and a half. So we're going to go for at least another 15 minutes, possibly longer. We're not going to go past 2 hours though, just so you know. Okay. So those of us in activism are familiar with a phrase called bystander training, where when somebody is in a situation where they are being victimized, assaulted, ignored, attacked verbally or otherwise, what can we do in that situation? In the military, we see aggressions all day long. We see just, especially with people of color. So I want to ask you guys, I want you to talk about your experiences. Either you were in a situation where you were the victim or you were a bystander. What could you have done differently? What do you wish somebody else would have done differently? Or what was a good thing that happened that you wish would still continue? I want to talk about some experiences and what we can take from that to change things going forward. And just don't raise hands, just pop up.
I had a situation once when I was called on active duty in Hawaii, and there was a white officer who was like the assistant commander or whatever, and he was referring to a Korean and a Black officer as "you monkeys." And so I told my commander, I told my boss what had happened. I was the same rank as the junior officer. So I told my boss what happened, and he didn't take any action. And the African-American officers reported it to the Inspector General, and they did an investigation. So had I, even though my boss didn't do anything, he was also African-American, even though he didn't do anything, I probably should have taken the action anyway, because that does happen a lot. Is that, there are checks and balances, and he did get what was due him eventually. But the fact that those little tiny cuts happen just about every day. And yes, it's stressful. I later became the Inspector General. So I was able to do those kinds of investigations and to call it out. But what I wanted to say, one thing is to back up about racism in itself. It's like, that is an ideology that is like racecraft. There's no justification for it. There is no difference between the races. It's something we invented to explain and excuse the fact that Blacks were held as slaves. And that's been perpetrated over the years. And we were indoctrinated and grown into that. So now many Black folks believe the hype. They believe it, and we've lived with that, those stressors. Why we have such high blood pressure, why we have so many other illnesses, because we had to live with that baggage on us for all these centuries. It's like, our genes almost remember it. And until we have reparations of some kind, even if that means the discussion, saying, I'm sorry, it's starting a national discussion about how do we fix it? How do we make it right for you? We tried, the quotas and all those things, and that doesn't really work. So what we want is equality. So one of the things that Black Lives Matter suggested is free education for Black people and people who've been impacted by racism. That goes a long way towards normalizing and closing the race gap. The wealth gap is by providing free education so people aren't saddled with student loan debt and all those kinds of things. But we first have to acknowledge it. If you know anything about the history of Germany, after World War II, the Germans have adopted this national idea of never again. They have monuments everywhere to help make people really be aware that they're sorry for what they did and it will never happen again. There are monuments all over. I even saw, when I went there once, a basketball court at like the 20th story of a building. And I asked the tour guide, why is that basketball hoop at the 20th on the 20th floor? She said, it's impossible. Never again. We can't do that. It's just a symbol everywhere. We've never done that.
Look, Sheila, guess what? Think about what our remembrance is. It's not never again. It's the Confederate flag.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
When all the Confederate
That's how we commemorate.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we can take from that it will happen again, and it is happening again.
It's never stopped because we've never taken that first step, which is acknowledgement.
Yes.
Acknowledgement, apology, reparation. That's what has to happen before we can ever get to a truly race blind, and it's never going to happen completely like that. But until we get to full equality, it's going to start with those basic building blocks: acceptance, acknowledgement, and discussion, reparation, some effort on the part of our government. And leaders like us, like me, I want to go to Congress and change it.
Yeah, but I think it's also,
I want to go and work with other people who are progressive and like-minded. I'm ready. I'm sorry.
We need to start to take it one step further and begin to speak in terms of equity in our conversations, because equity gives us a boost up. Equality just puts us in the same level playing field. But the problem with that is that we didn't start at the same level. So therefore, it's never going to be equal.
Yep. Maria, go ahead.
One time I was passed over for a job, and it was very clear that there was racism involved. This was within a defense agency. Because I had more experience, had more education, I had everything, all those checks, all those blocks that you check and check and check and check, and it still doesn't make a difference. So I took them to task. I filed an EEO suit against them, and all of a sudden everybody just went away. I became almost like poison. Because I was a troublemaker. But the bottom line is, apparently there's a system where you can complain about racism. It's a weak system, but it's one that we have to use. That's what we have to use right now. And I used it. And after months and months and months of struggling and justifying myself and losing friends and on and on and on, I ended up getting the promotion. But it required a lot of, courage, and it required a lot of resilience on my part. And And yeah, there were people in the process that were of color, that wanted to ignore me. But, bottom line is you just got to move forward. It's like running for Congress. I ran for Congress too in Arizona. And all this experience I had, this is why the whole issue of racism just fell on me like a ton of bricks again.
So Mary, would you call that a Pyrrhic victory? Where that you went through so much, but you eventually won, but it wasn't really worth it, to a certain extent, because of all the hell you went through in that process.
Well, I ended up getting promoted, but at the same time, I was a bad pill. You know what I'm saying? I got promoted because I complained. Right. You lose so much, but the bottom line, you still have to do it. You still have to do it. So when I ran for Congress, all this experience of the President of the United States thinking that I was qualified enough to be able to handle a federal level job of billions of dollars. And I just wasn't, it was like it wasn't important. It wasn't real because a brown person had done it. And we just don't, no matter what we do, how many checks how many blocks we check, it's never good enough. And why? Is because this society is still so freaking racist, and so we just, like I said, goes back to looking at the institutions and calling it for what it is and being that bitch. You just have to do it. You have to do it alone sometimes.
Just tell it like it is, Mary. Tell it like it is.
Exactly.
So
and here I am being
Go ahead, Carmen.
Eve, you asked a really important question, which was, what should we do? What could we do? And I want to use the example. We've been talking about racism, but we know that genderism, the bias towards women in the military is so huge. And they have had a success that I think that we can transition over to support racism within the military, because if it happens at the military, it eventually rolls down to corporate America. And that is military sexual trauma. Any woman now who is assaulted or harassed, there's a military sexual trauma advocate in every single command. Why don't we advocate for a racial trauma? Right. Because the military does something interesting. So if I accuse somebody of racism or genderism, okay, they get charged, but I'm the victim. There is no record in my military record that I was ever a victim. There's only a record in the perpetrator's file. So what happens is you get out, you go for your military benefits. Well, how can you claim that you were ever military sexually assaulted? There's no record of you as a victim. And that was the logic that was utilized to start supporting women. But we could do that and create that racial representative and start treating it like a crime, as Ali said, right from the get-go. Whether it was a word, an action, even if it's in a promotion. So we can start having victim advocates for racism, and then we can start healing that trauma. Because once you get out and you apply for VA benefits, something fascinating happens. They will tell you that racial bias is something that you can get compensated for. Wow. So therefore, the military has already acknowledged that not only does it exist, it causes long-term harm and it's compensatable. So therefore, we need to get ahead and go on the front side and say, let's put advocates in place.
That's even a VA thing. We need to get VA advocates to help people apply for those benefits. Go ahead, Vicki.
How do you translate that into just the regular society?
So, I don't know, we call that equal opportunity, but it can't be that anymore. We need to almost have a legal liaison, because we know this impacts healthcare, it impacts mental health care, it impacts the wellness within our family and an overall wellness within our community. So this may actually be a legal advocate. Maybe our judges could help guide some of this.
And quick one, can't you attach that onto public health safety? Because you know there are different counties and things and states that are starting to have these discussions, and some are passing it about how racism is a public health issue, which we all know it is. And we have a paper trail, scientific and medical paper trail that links, you know, African Americans, and of course we know our indigenous counterparts to intergenerational trauma, which has been left by the legacy of slavery. So
Well,
can't that?
It's considered in Anne Arundel County a health issue, and there's a state of emergency because of racism in Anne Arundel County as we speak. They're developing a health equity office. The problem that I have with it is that who else knows that in Anne Arundel County it's a state of emergency because of racism?
This is a really good opportunity in a program for us to promote and to start guiding, because this could become a model countrywide.
Yes.
Ohio's doing it.
Huh?
Yeah, Ohio.
Ohio just did it.
Yeah, and there are other, I think there are 13, I don't know if it's 13 countries or if it's 13 states. And it may be counties or whatever. What did I say?
Counties.
I mean, 13 states. I don't know if it's 13 counties, but I know in 13 states there are places where racism has been literally started to become known as a public health safety.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, issue. I don't know if the official term is because I can't remember. And so I think that, honestly speaking, that is probably the route we should be going. I know that these conversations are being held in other circles regarding racism, but we know that not the cool thing, but the one thing that we do have, like I said, on our side is that the studies already prove that the African-American and indigenous DNA, especially the brain patterns, have already been altered due to the traumas left by the legacy of slavery and that inner utero, you know, because if my grandmother had it and she carried my mom, da 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 da. So we already have a paper trail, you know. So I think that is probably where we all, as individuals, as communities, as a collective, and especially as a nation, should be going. But again, that is up to us, the people down here on the ground. We have to stop looking for the people at the top. The people at the top are us. They're in those positions because of us. And so change, we can't keep talking about, let's start it at the federal, no, it has to start on an organic level. We should, as communities, we should be creating stuff already. You know what I mean? And then, and then have these models and say, hey, this is what we did. This is what we created. What are you going to do? And how are you going to implement it? And what does that look like? Because it's supposed to be a bottom up. And for some odd reason, for over the last century or maybe more, things have topsy-turvied, and it's like the top is holding all the cards.
You know what's fascinating about this is that Pete Smith was the councilman who drafted the racism as a mental health crisis, a healthcare crisis in Anne Arundel County, and he's a Marine. So we have another veteran here. I think it'd be really interesting. Pete's in a different elected position now, but we could tap Pete on the shoulder and say, let's grow this. And what were you envisioning? And talk to Stuart Pittman and our current county council and guide them, because not one of them has a military background, by the way.
Well, now the Marines, I'm sorry, Vicki, I didn't mean to cut you out. Right now in the military, the Marines are leading the charge with changing racism in the military. So you guys want to look at them because they're starting to institute some hardcore stuff regarding racism.
And I would say that it's a little bit easier in the Marines because it's a smaller organization. Things happen very quickly. It's not like the Navy where there's so much and huge infrastructure. The Marine Corps is lean and they can make it happen from the word up. But it has to come from the top. It has to start at the top. They have to have the desire to make it change.
You probably
another part of this is
locally, excuse me, Dawn, you probably should start locally with the health department because they have that Office of Equity. Maybe you could join on the bi-weekly calls that they have, bi-monthly calls.
I just wanted to add to it that this idea of racism and addressing it has to happen because recruiters are having difficulty getting people to join the military. So if you have this problem going on, you have to have something to draw people in. So you have to correct it because, as I first stated, recruiters are having a very, very difficult time recruiting officers.
Amen. Just want to let you guys know we have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And I'm going to just put something out there real quick. In the Navy, we have something called AnyMouse, which is a kind of a takeoff on the word anonymous. And it's a system where you can submit complaints without using your name, without doing anything. And the people, the commanding officer and the executive officer have to review all of the AnyMouse submissions, has to go right to the front office to submit those. So my question for you is, did anybody ever use that system or a system like it with success or failure, honestly?
I'd like to chime in a little bit about that because it sort of reminds me of the whistleblower system where people make anonymous whistleblower complaints. And we already saw during the impeachment trial that to me was a huge failure. But for many political reasons, more so than anything else, because, yes, the House did vote to impeach the president, but then, of course, when it got to the Senate side, there was no formal trial that transpired that had the end result of removal. So the whistleblower system, when you look at it, it needs to be revamped because people are not, whoever filed that whistleblower complaint anonymously, they would never do it again. And it's a deterrent to them right now because the system is not working and it's not resulting in people who have been accused of a crime, them being fully protected, number one. But at the same time, there's got to be a major revamping of the system. And that, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish if you.
Yeah, I was almost finished. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So you are absolutely right. There are processes in place. The inspectors general, and the whistleblower made a complaint. The inspector general took it to Congress. They did the right thing. It's just that this Senate has completely obliterated the checks and balances and the oversight. And this president has inspired 4 inspectors general who are the ones that are supposed to be doing the oversight. And it's criminal. It's embarrassing, it's hurtful, and it's damaging not only our democracy, but our rule of law. Oh my goodness, where this guy can just single-handedly change and upend all of the things that are supposed to protect us, protect those whistleblowers and protect the inspectors and protect the taxpayer and their money and their safety. Just think of all the things that have been going on that are probably true, but have never been truly litigated because the Senate has absconded on its responsibility. I was marching with a group and got arrested because during the time when the Senate was having the hearings and they wouldn't even have witnesses. There is a complete meltdown in our system right now. Our Senate, they feel like it's totally, if they're not in good with the president, that they don't have a future. Well, you forgot why you got elected. It's for the people. The purpose of serving the people is not to agree with everything that the president says. It's to make sure that the needs and the benefits of the people are preserved. And it's horrible. So yeah, it goes all the way down to the AnyMouse kind of complaint. If you don't have people in the chain of command and in the structure that actually takes the action that's required of them, then it's failure. It's a failure. And yes, I've used it in terms of being on the receiving end of those complaints and investigating them. Some of them, not always are they legitimate, but you have to do the inquiry. And that's where we're failing right now.
That's really comes down to what other people were saying earlier, the importance of voting. That's why it's important to vote. And a lot of our young folks don't really appreciate why they kind of think it's not necessary to vote anymore. But every vote matters and it can make the difference. I mean, if you look at how many votes a lot, especially your local legislative positions required to get into office, there in Anne Arundel County, you get a couple of thousand votes and you're in office. That means everybody's vote counts. Imagine what a race it would be if everybody voted. then it'd be a true indication that somebody was there because they really were the desired candidate.
Well, I think what Sheila said earlier is we have to, candidates, we need to ask them, what do you think about, what are you going to do about racism? Many of those candidates, although they call themselves progressive, are going to have a physical reaction to the word. They're not going to want to talk about it, So, but we still have, every single candidate must be asked, not only, what do you think about Medicare and healthcare? What do you think about, the environment? What do you think about racism and how are you going to get rid of it? It should be one of the primary candidates' talking points.
Amen.
It's not, I can tell you right now, it's not.
Yeah.
Margot, I want to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, I always come from a spiritual perspective. We know racism truly is a virus, and it is pervasive, and it is global. So in my opinion, I really feel that it's important that individually we take responsibility for where we are in our consciousness about healing the planet, because racism has been around for ages and eons, and it's used to divide and conquer people, while the top 1%, 10% control the world. And so I know there's agenda behind this agenda of racism. So I think the more we become more informed and aware of how we can individually, be it grassroots organizations, through be it having training in diversity and inclusion, implicit, explicit bias training in all levels of government, but we got to come together as a people. We've got to teach our children that love truly is the answer. It's all a big distraction. We are human, we're one big family. And racism is, like I said, it is a tool that's being used to divide and conquer. While the top 1% is controlling and planning through vaccinations and depopulation to control us. So it's bigger than that, So we got to work on a grassroots level, a governmental level. We've got to work on all levels, and and really encourage our young people, because they are our future.
Yes.
To take responsibility for their life, their health, their political consciousness, and to get involved.
I just have to say this. I know, Eva, you